Good morning. Last week's verdict in New York shows how corrupt, rigged, and un-American the weaponized justice system has become under Joe Biden and Democrats. The facts are clear. This was a zombie case illegally brought forward by a corrupt prosecutor doing Joe Biden's political bidding in a desperate attempt to save Joe Biden's failing and catastrophic campaign. The case hinged on the testimony of a convicted felon who was disbarred for lying and perjured himself to Congress. This sham trial was overseen by a corrupt and highly unethical judge who is a Biden donor and whose own family has directly profited from this case. This corrupt Democrat judge imposed a clearly unconstitutional gag order on President Trump and his team. The prosecution team that brought forward this case consisted of a Soros-funded far-left Democrat district attorney on a vendetta, Democrat political operatives, and Democrat donors. We must work and are committed to working around the clock to ensure President Trump is victorious this November to save America from Biden's failed far-left Democrat agenda and this illegal weaponization of the justice system against the American people. This week, on the floor, House Republicans will deliver for our veterans and continue our steadfast support for our most precious ally, Israel. At every opportunity, Joe Biden has turned his back on Israel, most recently refusing to sanction the International Criminal Court following their politically motivated targeting of Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. The ICC must be immediately sanctioned. That is why today House Republicans will bring Chip Roy's bill, the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act, to the House floor to ensure needed guardrails to protect Israel and all our allies from baseless, undemocratic attacks by the international bureaucrats of this illegitimate court. We will also bring up the Milcon VA appropriations bill to fully fund veterans programs and benefits and prohibit the Biden administration from funding woke priorities. I'm proud to announce that following many years of advocacy, this legislation will also secure Fort Drum in upstate New York in my district as the third missile defense site on the East Coast, ensuring our policy of peace through strength by bolstering our nation's defense. With that, we have two special guests today, Congressman Michael Guest, who serves on the Milcon VA Appropriations Subcommittee, and we also have Congressman Juan Ciscomani from Arizona to discuss the impact of the Biden border crisis. We will begin with Michael Guest from Mississippi.
Good morning. At a time in which we see war in Europe, fighting in the Middle East, continued unrest in the Indo-Pacific, House Republicans are making a substantial investment in our military infrastructure while simultaneously fully funding VA benefits and health care. This bill provides more money than the president requested. You would believe in a time in which we see these global challenges that the White House would support increased funding, that they would find this bill to be something that which they could rally behind. But we know that that is not the case. The White House does not take issues with the funding levels. And in a statement, the administration said that they appreciate that the bill provides the VA with the continued funding and support of key priorities. What the White House takes issue with, and what the White House has said in their statement, says the White House is taking issue with the fact the bill makes the VA follow the Hyde Amendment. The White House also calls out provisions that would ban gender-affirming care, ban the VA from flying the LGBTQ plus pride flag at its facilities, and prohibit any discriminatory action from being taken against someone whose religious or whose moral beliefs are that marriage should be recognized as a union between one man and one woman. This veto threat shows that our president cares more about liberal policies than he does about honoring the promise that we have made our veterans. I hope and I believe that all members should support this legislation and that the House will stand with our veterans who have sacrificed to serve and protect this great nation we call home. And with that, I would like to recognize my colleague from the great state of Arizona, Juan Ciscomani.
Good morning, and thanks for being here. Serious problems call for serious solutions. And the current border crisis is at the worst point we've ever seen any kind of border crisis in our country. And listen, I'm always open to working with anyone to find the solutions that we need for these kind of problems. But the initial reports that we've been seeing regarding the executive order by President Biden later today regarding the border, they don't indicate a serious approach to this very serious issue. And there's a reason for my skepticism on what we're about to see. On day one, this president signed dozens of executive orders that caused this border crisis. Since then, he refused to take any kind of responsibility or ownership over this crisis. Also, since then, refused that he had any authority to actually solve or address this crisis that we're seeing now. So after doing that, and he's about to sign one executive order, my expectation of what this was actually do is pretty low. What we see today, and just a little bit from this president, if it's in line with anything else that we've seen up to this point, that is the reason of my skepticism of what's actually going to be in it and how serious this is going to be to solve the issue. If it's in line with the way he's acted before, it's going to be too little too late, and probably not enough, and not enough seriousness to actually address this issue. What we do know about this potential executive order regarding a 2,500-person limit, that's a problem. If that's the case, that sets a number of how many people can actually enter the country legally before we allow our border agents to start doing their job. So I have an issue with 2,500, 5,000, or whatever the number is that we've seen before. If that number can be 2,500, why not make it 0 to allow people to break the laws of this country before entering and then actually allow our agents to do their job? My district, border agents, my border community, they demand serious answers for this serious problem. And it's time for us to have some meaningful solutions on this and to find and see meaningful leadership from this White House. So this is my message. Let's get serious about this issue now. We have no time to waste. We have to do it right now. Thank you. And with that, I would like to yield to my friend, Majority Whip Tom Emmer.
Thank you, Juan. Last week, Democrats pulled off the biggest sham in U.S. history. It's no secret that their case against President Trump has been a witch hunt from the beginning. From a conflicted judge who has donated to anti-Trump causes to the lead prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, who campaigned on going after President Trump, to the ridiculous charges to Matthew Colangelo, a senior Biden DOJ official, leaving his position in the administration to join Bragg's team, to the prosecution's star witness, who my colleague, our conference chair, referenced, Michael Cohen, a real criminal, admitting to multiple crimes on the stand. All of the evidence in this case points to one simple fact. This was never about what President Trump did or didn't do. It's about who he is. He's the leading Republican candidate for president. And the Democrats have made it clear that they will stop at nothing, even if it means weaponizing our justice system and trampling on the rule of law to try and prevent him from getting to the White House again. The good news is the American people are not fools. They see this for the sham that it is, and they will issue the ultimate verdict this November. Until then, House Republicans will continue to do our part to give Americans the transparency and accountability they deserve on the shady cast of characters who are hell-bent on attacking President Trump. Last month, I wrote to Attorney General Merrick Garland demanding that this corrupt Department of Justice take immediate action to indict Cohen for repeatedly lying under oath to Congress and answer to our congressional committees on their documents requests to Colangelo. Chairman Jordan has called on Bragg and Colangelo to testify before our Select Committee on the Weaponization of the federal government next week. Speaker Johnson has also said we're going to look at Special Counsel Jack Smith, who we believe has been abusing his authority as well. Bottom line, the Democrats' corrupt weaponization of our justice system must be stopped. And we're going to do everything in our power to hold them accountable. And with that, I turn it over to our leader, Steve Scalise.
Last week was a sad time for anybody in America who believes in the basic tenet that justice is blind, that everybody in America is going to get equal treatment regardless of who they are. We saw from the very beginning of this trial that Alvin Bragg did not want to just target somebody based on criminal wrongdoing. He wanted to target somebody based on who they were. That's how he actually campaigned. Talk about somebody beginning their campaign with a bias, saying he was going to go after people, to use the weight of government to target his political opponents. Now, we know that happens in third world countries. That cannot be the norm in the United States of America. And I think that's what disgusted so many people, Republican, Democrat, Independent, that disagreed with not only the verdict, but the fact that the case should have never been brought to trial. And so when you see this weaponization of government against political opponents, starting at the top with Joe Biden, allowing his agencies to go after political opponents, encouraging Democrat DAs, conflicted judges. We've heard all the stories, the reports, a judge that donated to the campaign of Joe Biden. Talk about a conflict of interest, whose own daughter was making millions of dollars off of the trial. And yet here we are. This cannot be the new norm for the United States of America. And as Donald Trump said, he's going to fight this thing not only for himself, but for every American who could be the next person that they go after. And so this Republican majority is going to continue to go and look into the weaponization of government. We have committees, obviously, aggressively pursuing that, continuing to get transparency, bringing in witnesses. But we also are bringing legislation. You're going to see in the appropriations process us look at the funding of some of these agencies. You're going to also see policies that are going to be coming forward to address the abuses of power that we've seen. And so this is going to be something that continues. I know my colleague Juan Ciscomani talked about the open southern border, and we've all been talking about the perils of Joe Biden's policies, as today he tries to throw out another fig leaf to try to distract people from the failures of his own policies. I think most people in America now know Joe Biden, with a pen, could fix the problems that he created, and he chooses not to. He doesn't want to fix the problem. In fact, he actively opposed the bill that we passed through this House, H.R. 2, that would have actually secured America's border. He wants it to be open. But you just saw a couple of days ago yet another glaring example of the failures of the Biden open border policy. And that's when 2 more New York Police Department officers were shot by someone here in this country illegally. How many times is Joe Biden going to allow this kind of criminal activity in the United States by people here illegally that he's let in the door to injure cops, to kill people like Lake and Riley, before he actually works with Republicans to do something about it? Because ultimately the voters will have a say on November 5th on all of these issues. But if you look at the bill we brought forward just a few weeks ago, imagine this. We had a bill on the House floor that said any illegal who assaults a police officer in the United States of America is immediately deported. Do you know that almost 70% of Democrats voted against that bill? And then just a few days ago, 2 NYPD cops are shot by someone here illegally. And they don't want that illegal criminal to be deported. It's unbelievable how far left their party has gone. It's unrecognizable to most people in America. But again, that's what's at stake on November 5th. And then you turn to what we're doing this week, standing up for our military veterans, bringing bills, as we heard from, that are going to be really important to make sure that our veterans have the tools and resources they need when they come home after defending our freedoms, so that they're properly taken care of with the Milcon VA bill, and then, of course, the ICC bill, the rogue radical actions of the International Criminal Court going after Prime Minister Netanyahu with no justification. We're going to be pushing back on that. Initially, the White House was supporting that effort, and now they've walked away because their radical left in their own party does not any longer support the Jewish state of Israel. Well, we surely do, and we're going to be standing up for Israel and against radical actions like the ICC this week as well. With that, the leader of our party, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Thank you all for being here. something is happening in the country right now, and I've been traveling extensively around the country. I was out this past week in the Rust Belt, and I was in states like Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin and Illinois. And when the verdict came down against President Trump, there was something palpable that happened around the country. And I don't know if you sensed it where you were and among the groups where you were over the last week, but people realized that we have reached a new low. And when you have activist prosecutors and the Democratic Party, who are so desperate because of the presidential campaign and the way it's going, they understand that Donald Trump, all the polling shows, is crushing Joe Biden. They're in panic mode on the Democratic side, and they are so desperate to stop Donald Trump. He's winning in the swing states. He's winning among the people. He's winning among new demographics that have never voted Republican before. They see this happening, and they're so desperate to stop him that they are willing to use the judicial system to do so. It is a new low, and it's a dangerous one, because what they're doing is they're eroding the people's faith in our system of justice itself. As Leader Scalise said, people have to believe that justice is blind. You have to believe that there is equal justice under the law in order to maintain a constitutional republic. This goes to the very core of who we are, the foundation of who we are as a nation, and that's why it's bigger than just President Trump. It's bigger than just these cases. It's about our system itself. And because of that, there is a backlash. President Trump hit a fundraising record the day after, within 24 hours of the verdict. We did as well on our fundraising platforms. We raised record amounts of money because people understand what's at stake now. This is not just a contest between two individuals for president. It's now about whether we're going to defend the integrity of our system itself. And we're going to do everything we can, everything within our scope of our responsibility in the Congress to address it appropriately. And I announced this morning to our conference we're working on a three-pronged approach. You heard Leader Scalise and others reference it today. But we're looking at various approaches to what can be done here through the appropriations process, through the legislative process, through bills that we'll be advancing through our committees and putting on the floor for passage, and also through oversight. All those things will be happening vigorously, because we have to do that, because the stakes are too high and because people are losing faith in our institutions. And that, at the end of the day, is something that should concern every single one of us, and I think it does. On other issues, I just want to tell you one important number, 126. 126. It was 126 days ago today that Joe Biden said, quote, "I've done all I can do." He was asked about why he wouldn't use his extensive executive authority to address the border catastrophe that he himself created. And 126 days ago, he looked into the cameras and said, I'm out of options. I've done all I can do. He tried to convince us all for all this time that there was no way he could possibly fix the mess. Remember that he engineered it. When Congressman Siscomani said a few moments ago, he began this on the day he took office over 3.5 years ago. He walked into the Oval Office and he started issuing executive orders, dozens of them. We counted 64 specific executive actions that President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas took to open that border wide. They did it intentionally. They engineered the open border. There's no question about it. The evidence is so clear. And now, suddenly, now he wants to issue some weak executive order. One executive order, supposedly to try to address the issue. It's window dressing. Everybody knows it. If he was concerned about the border, he would have done this a long time ago. And we don't know what's in this. The devil will definitely be in the details here, I can assure you. But from what we're hearing, it will ignore multiple elements that have to be addressed, the elements that were in our legislation that we passed over 14 months ago, to fix the broken asylum program, to fix the broken parole process, to reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy, to end the catch and release policy that they've advanced. Those are the reasons that this catastrophe has been allowed to continue. And whatever little short measure that he's going to do here is not going to solve the problem. In fact, by some estimates, it might make it worse, because it will extend once again the welcome mat. Incentivize people to come and be among the first 2,500 is what we're hearing. The first 2,500 per day to come in, to be ensured that you get your welcome package when you come into the country illegally. It's absolute madness. They're going to say he's using Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act. You know what? I read him that provision myself on the telephone a year ago. 7 months ago, I know, after I became Speaker, we had this conversation. I told him this. First, he tried to tell me it didn't exist. Then I read him the language on the phone. Later, I met with him in person, reiterated the same language. And that provision is so broad, it allows the president to use his authority unilaterally if he determines it to be in the best interest of the country. If it's detrimental to the interest of our country, he can close the border down entirely. He's not going to do that. He has no interest in doing that. They want it wide open. So this weak measure here, don't be fooled. One executive order can in no way undo the 64 specific executive actions he's already taken and 3.5 years of chaos that they've allowed to ensue. House Republicans, on the other hand, stand with the American people, and we've been fighting on this every single day to protect the border. We passed H.R. 2, the most comprehensive border protection measure that's ever been passed by Congress, still sitting on Chuck Schumer's desk collecting dust 14 months later. We passed the Lake and Riley Act after violent crimes and even murders have been committed by the illegals in the country. We passed legislation to deport illegals who commit crimes here, like drunk driving and Social Security fraud and assaulting law enforcement officers. We passed resolution after resolution, and we ultimately impeached Secretary Mayorkas at DHS. Why? Because historically desperate times call for historic measures. It's a very rare thing to impeach a cabinet official, but we had to do it. On other issues with regard to the ICC, we are on the floor this week. The House will be passing legislation to sanction the ICC for its outrageous efforts to arrest Israeli officials. The idea that they would issue an arrest warrant for the Prime Minister of Israel, Defense Minister of Israel, at the time when they're fighting for their nation's very existence against the evil of Hamas as a proxy of Iran, is unconscionable to us. And as I said a couple of weeks ago, the ICC has to be punished for this action. We cannot allow this to stand. If the ICC was allowed to do this and go after the leaders of countries whose actions they disagree with, why would they not come after America? You already have leaders around the world in smaller countries who take issue with things we do around the globe. Why wouldn't they then issue arrest warrants for the next president of the United States or any of our defense officials? Why not? We have to stand against it. We can't allow bureaucrats to make decisions about what we're doing and come and have this authority. So our legislation, which will have bipartisan support, will apply visa restrictions and economic sanctions to anybody at the ICC trying to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute protected persons, including U.S. allies. It's a really important step for us. We know the president doesn't like to listen to us, but I hope that he'll listen to the members of at least his own party who are denouncing the ICC and calling for action. President Biden ought to recognize the danger of letting them pursue these illegitimate investigations and the need to sanction the ICC in response to that. Last thing I'll mention is that the Milcon VA bill, as has been noted, is on the floor. First appropriations bill of FY 2025. It fully funds veterans' health care and benefits programs. It bolsters our national security at a very important time. Refocuses the executive branch by prohibiting enforcement of woke DEI policies and the use of funds on promoting critical race theory. Protects the Second Amendment rights of veterans. Prevents taxpayer dollars from being used for abortions. And all the commitments that the American people expect us to maintain here will do. But yesterday, the White House said, no surprise, it'll veto the legislation. It sends a terrible signal to our nation's allies and to our adversaries. The president's push toward radical and woke policies is continuing threat to our national security. We shouldn't be using the military for this, and everybody knows it. His agenda is changing the focus of the military. It is undermining our readiness, and it's rejecting the promises made to our veterans. We need the president to reverse course on this because we've got to prioritize America's strength and safety. It may never have been important. It certainly hasn't been more important to do that in any previous time in our lifetime. And the stakes couldn't be higher. With that, I'll take a few questions. Front row.
Mr. Speaker, Marjorie Taylor Greene has said that she's going to trigger a privilege resolution to impeach President Biden this week if you don't move on that. Have you had any discussions on that yet, and is that something you'd be open to doing if it's effective now?
We haven't talked about it. I mean, in general, the impeachment power is one that we wield very carefully here, as I've said so many times. Next to declaration of war, it's the heaviest power that Congress has. It needs to be very methodical. Look, there's no question. President Biden, I think, is the worst president. I think President Biden is the worst president in the history of the country. And there may well be impeachable offenses. There's an investigation process that's gone about that has been looked at of our committees of jurisdiction, and the process continues. So I'm not making any commitment on that this morning. We have to let the constitutional process and our constitutional responsibility play out. So, yes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. When talking about President Biden's EO that we expect to roll out, two questions on that. One, why is no limit, which is what we have now, better than some limit? You know, why are you saying we shouldn't go for at least some limit here? And then also, is your plan to actually move some kind of legislative vehicle? We know H.R. 2 is what you want, but to actually get something done that can pass through Congress, is your plan essentially just to wait till the election and hope that Republicans win?
No, we've been aggressively pushing to secure the border every single day of this Congress. Since the Republicans took the majority, we've been working on it every day.
But what legislation?
We have pieces of H.R. 2 that will be advancing, but the problem is we already know it's not a lawmaking exercise. If the Senate Democrats and the White House were interested in solving the border, we could have done this a long time ago. Limits are fine, but it's not going to solve the problem. It is not going to solve the problem. January 3rd of this year, we took 64 Republicans, House Republicans, down to the border at Eagle Pass, and it was the largest congressional trip ever to the border, and we talked with the people in charge. We visited the processing centers. At the time, Eagle Pass was the epicenter. They cleaned it up and changed the routes after we showed up down there, but they were allowing so many people in, it was a countless number, and what they told us there was they said, I've said this in this room before, the deputy chief of Border Patrol, a 33-year veteran of the agency, said, we don't need more buckets. We need to stop the flow. He said, it's as if I'm having to administer an open fire hydrant. Who opened the fire hydrant? Joe Biden did. They knocked the cap right off of that thing, and it's been flowing ceaselessly for 3.5 years plus. Our estimate is that there's at least 10, 12 million, maybe as many as 16 or 17 million illegals have come across the border in that time. Where do we get that number? The DHS numbers, the official numbers are over 10 million now, and they count over 3 million, I think, known gotaways, but we don't know how many people came in totally undetected because we know there are wide sections of the border that are not adequately protected. At Eagle Pass, they told us 60 to 70% of the people who came through there were single adult males between the ages of 18 and 45 of military capability. These are not huddled masses of families seeking refuge and asylum. These are people coming in probably to do us harm. It doesn't take a big stretch of the imagination to do it. Look, Joe Biden knows all this. He knows it. If he would just reinstate remain in Mexico, that would reduce the flow by 70%. He will not even consider it. He will not even consider it. Mexico just got a new president elected. Now would be a great time to reestablish some boundaries here to do this. Joe Biden won't even consider it. Why? Because they actually want the border open, and that's why we're so frustrated about it. Yes, sir.
Speaker Johnson, I haven't seen anything about any Republicans planning on boycotting Netanyahu's address when it happens. Do you think that Senator Schumer, Congressman Jeffries are going to encourage Democrats to attend, and what do you make of the number of Democrats who are potentially going to boycott it when it happens?
I was on a Sunday show, Fox News Sunday this weekend, and they played a tape of Bernie Sanders, Senator Bernie Sanders, who said terrible things about Prime Minister Netanyahu and said that he would boycott the address. So be it. I made the point. Bernie Sanders has taken the side. He was parroting the talking points of Hamas and the Ayatollah in Iran. This is a time to choose a side. If Bernie Sanders wants to side with the terrorists, that's so be it. And if other Democrats want to do that, it's on them. But I'm telling you, I pray and hope and expect that most of the members of the House of both parties and the Senate will join us for this historic address. It's really important for us to hear directly from the Prime Minister of Israel at this pivotal moment in history. We need to hear his take and his account of what's happening there, and I think it'll be a very important thing. We need to show bipartisan support for our closest ally in the Middle East for all the obvious reasons. It's the only stable democracy there, and we've got to allow them to prosecute this war so that peace can be brokered back in the region. And I think it's really important for everybody to come. And even if you have misgivings about it, come and listen. I mean, this is a really important moment for the Congress. And I was told that, I was reminded that it will be an historic address for Prime Minister Netanyahu. He'll be the first foreign head of state to address the Congress 4 times. The record is a tie right now between he and I think Winston Churchill, maybe one other. But you know, this is a historic moment, a historic event, and I think and I hope that it will be bipartisan in the approach. I certainly do.
No Republicans skipping it?
No Republicans will skip it. I guarantee you that. Certainly not intentionally, barring some health event or something. Scott.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, Hunter Biden, the president's only surviving son, is being criminally prosecuted right now in a Delaware court. Given that, do you think that that's proof that there is not a double standard, as you say, in the criminal justice system?
No, I don't think one case proves that at all. We have rogue prosecutors around the country that have drugged President Trump through this process because of who he is. Everybody knows if it wasn't him, the charges in Manhattan would never have been brought, and they would not be dragging this out as they are and seeking potentially prison term and all of that. Everybody acknowledges that. Legal experts on both sides of the aisle acknowledge that. Nor would these other cases have been brought. The classified documents case. I mean, still, no one's gone after President Biden for his abuses with classified documents, which was more and more locations and all the rest. Look, it doesn't matter what they do to orchestrate or try to put window dressing on this. The American people can see right through it. The American people are intelligent, and they understand intuitively what's happening here, and they see a two-tiered system, and they see that President Trump is being targeted for who he is because he is soon to be the official nominee of one of the two main parties in the country. He's the opponent of the president, and so the president and his Department of Justice have, participated in this, given it a pat on the back, and endorsed all of the stuff that's happening against him. And Democrats cheered when the verdict came down. I mean, it's just blatantly on display for everybody. So I think that's what's frustrating the American people. I think they've had enough of it, and I think there's going to be a reckoning on November 5th about this. As President Trump rightfully said, the main verdict that matters is the one that the people render in the election, and that can't get here soon enough. Thank you all for the time this morning.
Thank you, sir.
But